In the remote depths of the Marianas Archipelago, a remarkable and troubling chapter in containment history unfolded with the establishment of SCP-9000, known as Detention Center Tri-1. Created in 1983 through a collaborative effort between the SCP Foundation and the US federal government, this extra-dimensional prison facility represented an ambitious attempt to centralize and enhance the Foundation's D-Class program. The facility's strategic location, accessible only to authorized watercraft, ensured complete isolation from the outside world, while operating under the strict oversight of the Foundation's Department of Internal Affairs. The prison's population fluctuated over the years, reaching a significant milestone in 1994 with 2,521 inmates. These weren't ordinary prisoners. They were carefully selected individuals from maximum security prisons, chosen to participate in the Foundation's experimental programs. The facility promised these inmates a path to rehabilitation, though the reality of their situation often proved far more challenging than initially presented. Deputy Director Richard Aquino emerged as a pivotal figure in the facility's history, articulating a vision that positioned SCP-9000 as more than just a detention center. His philosophical approach emphasized the essential role of such facilities in the Foundation's broader mission. The Aquino System, named after him, introduced a merit-based structure that allowed D-Class personnel to advance through various ranks based on their performance and compliance with facility protocols. The D-Class program's origins dated back to 1958, but it was the establishment of SCP-9000 that marked a significant evolution in its implementation. As the Foundation's operations expanded globally, the demand for D-Class personnel grew exponentially. SCP-9000 was designed to address this increasing need while streamlining the process of managing and utilizing these human resources for various experimental procedures. The facility's early years showed promise, with the Aquino System appearing to provide a structured environment that balanced the needs of the Foundation with opportunities for inmates to improve their situations. D-Class personnel were assigned to various units based on their capabilities and behavior, with some, like the Data Unit, handling specialized tasks such as transcription and documentation of anomalous materials. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly efficient system, troubling signs began to emerge. The facility started experiencing operational deficiencies that would eventually culminate in the catastrophic Incident Totem. We'll get to that in a bit. Let's start with D1098. O'Day Chambers. Arrived May 1994. He was 21, coming from a Pennsylvania prison, convicted of involuntary manslaughter, had known gang ties, and they specifically picked him. The profile fit perfectly with what the system wanted. High chance of reoffending, which meant less chance someone would miss him badly on the outside. Few family connections. Already marginalized, perfect raw material for the program. The cell was not exactly comfortable, barely a cell. An anchored chair, a toilet, a sleeping slab, and the key element, a computer terminal screen. Right before they even logged on, they got Aquinos' welcome message pre-recorded, and it wasn't welcoming. The world sees you as a failure, but we aren't the world. We're giving you a chance, a privilege, he called it, to become useful, low-rank Foundation personnel. The way out, the path to a pardon, was labor, hard work, and rehabilitation through productivity. That was the promise and the only path offered. This system had a very deliberate merit-based structure designed to outsource what Aquino called the Foundation's soft yet essential labour, basically paperwork and grunt work. Everyone started in the data unit. The data unit was in charge of transcription. Massive amounts of it. Watching visual data, body cam footage from MTF teams, site security feeds, interviews, everything, and writing up detailed logs and summaries. Above the data unit was the review unit. D-class who did well in data could get promoted. They'd guide the transcribers, check their work, approve submissions, and they got perks. A bit more freedom, yard time, better food. It created an instant hierarchy competition. If you couldn't cut it in data, then you went down to the production unit, levels 4 and 5, basically manufacturing, making field gear, comms equipment, standard Foundation supplies. It was seen as the bottom. The leaderboard for the data unit fueled the desire to progress higher and get promoted, using competition as a control mechanism. Chambers saw himself start at 0 and immediately thought, I can do better than them. His initial assessment, 98th percentile in sensitivity, which is the ability to watch incredibly graphic, traumatic stuff for hours without freaking out, and high adaptability. Some of the files detail his early work in May 94. Transcribing hours of MTF Delta 1 footage, euthanizing people who had fused to walls and floors while still conscious, prying them off. Then there was edited footage of some SCP entity consuming its sexual partner whole, including the log notes, the non-anomalous discharges afterward, and interviews with child soldiers, kids 6 to 12 years old, describing how 43 adult soldiers died from some anomalous stimulant that made huge boils erupt on their feet. Chambers developed what he called a philosophical detachment. He told interrogators later the footage was like a movie. His old gang life, that was real. This proved to be incredibly effective for him. He had ranked 17 by November 94, cleared over 400 submissions. Late 1994, the warning reports start piling up. Structural problems, things that routine maintenance couldn't explain. Serious rebar corrosion, concrete cracking everywhere. Floors were actually starting to slope visibly, and repairs didn't hold. It was like the building itself was sick. They used ground-penetrating radar looking beneath the floor of this extra-dimensional space. He found something forming described as a swelling abscess of unknown materials, pooling beneath like a boil growing under the skin of the reality they had built. The anomaly starts targeting individuals. The transcripts stop being random horror. They became personalized, dredging up specific traumas from the inmate's past. Chambers was one of the first. He starts filing these frantic info requests. He's watching footage, weird stuff like rich people on a yacht eating a giant hairy-horned whale. And he swears he recognizes guys from Philly in the background. The barrier between the movie and his real life was breaking down. Then another log. Neo-fascists in Munich doing something horrible with hooded victims, forming them into a sphere of flesh. Chambers claims he recognizes their voices, people he knew. The screen wasn't a barrier anymore. It was a weaponized mirror. The straw that broke Chambers was Jason Davis's 8th birthday party. Just a 25-minute home video. No monsters, no gore, just ordinary life. A kid's party. And Chambers couldn't handle it. He just fixated on the screen. He couldn't transcribe past the 3-minute mark. He kept trying to stop the playback, but the terminal wouldn't respond. just kept looping the party. He ended up smashing the screen with his bare hands, fractured his right hand, anything to make the image stop. And he finally admitted who Jason Davis was. He confessed to Dr. Pearson later. Jason Davis was a child he'd accidentally killed years ago in a drive-by shooting. An innocent bystander. All the monsters, all the gore, he could handle that. But an innocent kid he'd killed, that's what broke him. He saw the gang members he'd fought or killed as soldiers part of the game. Davis was different. Innocent. The guilt he'd buried finally surfaced, triggered by the anomaly. December 94 onwards. Incident Totem. The wheels completely came off. We're talking total system failure. The psychological horror started manifesting physically everywhere. Weird industrial emissions from the production unit. The smell was consistent with burning bodies. Plumbing systems started getting clogged with these large clusters of epithelial tissue, skin, basically human skin. Localized effects continued. In the data unit, 25 inmates fused together into this grotesque web-like membrane, still alive apparently, and other D-class ones with low productivity scores started experiencing sudden paralysis. Like the anomaly itself was punishing inefficiency. Attempts to intervene from the outside failed catastrophically. The extradimensional barrier itself became hostile. MTF teams trying to repel in or breach were caught in this bizarre effect. An 8-hour free fall from the top of SCP-9000's internal space. Then their bodies would reappear at the top and drop again. Over and over, the space wouldn't let anyone in or out easily. January 95, it gets worse. Total lockdown. Ingress became impossible. Cells locked down automatically. 28 D-class died just from lack of food, water, air, and their sealed cells. The plumbing problem became a nightmare. The entire water system was polluted. Circulating blood, feces, sewage, chemical waste, just foulness pumped through every pipe. However, review personnel reported impossibly high output from the data unit, like 58 transcripts a day from some terminals. Thousands of submissions logged under the IDs of D-class, who were confirmed dead or fused or flattened. And Aquino, he vanished for a while. His disappearance coincided with two things: the entire psychiatric wing of the facility just ceasing to exist, and radar detecting a sixth layer forming beneath layer 5. Something new growing in the depths. That was SCP-9000-B. They identified it as an egregor, a conscious entity formed from collective thought and emotion. In this case, a swirling, pulsating mass of raw consciousness, born from all the suffering, rage, fear, and despair packed into the trench. And it was feeding off the prison, tapping into the prison's primary power source. It used that energy to manipulate the environment, generate the personalized footage, and warp reality. They later found parts of it, tumorous masses of human tissue fused directly into the building's wiring. The horror had become the infrastructure. February 1995, Aquino briefly reappeared, looking completely disheveled on the production floor, made one final log entry. Defiant to the end. He blamed his enemies in the Foundation, saying they put hell in this prison, but then claimed victory. He said they'd never stop building places like this, because the Foundation was now addicted to the D-class labour he'd systematized. Then he put a revolver in his mouth and pulled the trigger. his body was immediately consumed by the anomaly. Going back to Chambers, he was removed from the leaderboard for low productivity after the Jason Davis incident. When the final riots kicked off in February, cell doors opening, chaos everywhere. Chambers didn't join in. He told investigators later he saw it as pointless, fighting back against the bigger gang futile. He was obsessed with something else by then. He just wanted to keep watching the anomalous personalized footage. It had become his only window back to something resembling reality, however twisted. A connection to the consequences he couldn't escape. His recorded actions are hard to read about. He walks through the chaos on the production floor, finds the source of the anomaly, SCP-9000, this huge screaming mass rising from a glowing red breach in the floor. He doesn't fight it. He falls to his knees. The egregore extends a part of itself, a mass of tissue, and it reforms into the face of Jason Davis, the child. Chambers tries to speak, then just collapses unconscious. The tissue absorbs him, and that starts this documented 7-hour cycle of consumption, death, resurrection, repeats. The task force transcripts are graphic. He's consumed, brought back fully aware, immediately dies again, horribly impaling himself, throwing himself back into the mass, head bashed against the floor, only to be instantly resurrected to experience it all again for 7 hours straight, until the intervention teams finally got to him and pulled him out. The system wouldn't even let him stay dead. March 3rd, 1995. The Foundation finally got through and managed to banish SCP-9000, essentially firebombing it after getting through the barrier. There were survivors, 108 total, including 43 D-Class personnel. One of them was Chambers. By late 96, the Ethics Committee and Internal Affairs pushed through reforms, primarily focused on preventing another incident, not shutting down the program. Decentralization was key, back to smaller D-Class populations, like 15 to 35 per major site. No more single mega prisons, more recreation time, mandatory amnestics after viewing traumatic materials, specifically to stop the kind of personalized targeting that triggered Chambers, and maybe the egregore itself. And a focus on fostering a sense of community, managing the inmates' well-being. Aquino was right about one thing. The Foundation needed the labour. They couldn't or wouldn't stop, and that's why it was eventually rebuilt. So the reforms address management, supervision, and distribution. They focused on stopping another totem incident by spreading the load, managing the D-Class experience better. But they didn't change the fundamental nature of the work, forcing people to transcribe and process endless streams of horror. So here's a thought to leave you with. Now that these facilities are just being spread out, essentially diffused across dozens of smaller trenches instead of concentrated in one, how long until that diffused trauma starts to coalesce again? How long until the next totem incident may be slower, may be subtler, but built from the same fundamental darkness? What happens when all these sites spread out across the world gradually succumb to that darkness? What would happen if they all end up forming one huge egregore that connects everything together across the whole world? I'd like to thank you once again for joining me on this journey. And until next time, see you later.